The War Council chamber floated high above the surface of Veltron Prime, inside a massive station that glowed with silver towers and endless light. Inside, leaders of over 50 powerful species sat in curved rows, their faces calm, arrogant, and proud. These were not ordinary beings, they were the generals and admirals of the Galactic Union, the strongest alliance the galaxy had ever known. Some had fought for centuries, others ruled planets with millions of soldiers, and together they commanded a fleet of more than 3,000 warships. No one had ever dared to stand against them, and those who tried were wiped from the stars. This meeting was called because an unknown fleet had crossed into Union space. At first, the message was ignored: 12 ships, slow and quiet, barely worth mentioning. But when the patrol fleet sent to investigate vanished without a trace, and their last transmission was cut off mid-sentence, the Council took notice. A large screen showed the incoming fleet. Only 12 ships. No banners. No known identification. Just black shapes moving with silent purpose. Most generals laughed. The insectoid commander from Varkan clicked his mandibles with amusement and said, 12? We lose that many ships in training exercises. A stone-skinned warlord from Drexa slammed his fist on the table and shouted, Are we wasting time over a scouting party? Laughter filled the room. Even the cold-blooded strategists from Zenthar, known for never showing emotion, allowed themselves a grin. Send in one attack group. End this farce, someone said. Others agreed. The idea of 12 unknown ships threatening the Galactic Union was simply too ridiculous. But while the leaders joked and made loud decisions, one small voice hesitated. A young sensor officer named Relin, from the moon world of Exeros, stood in the shadows behind the main display. His job was simple: monitor incoming data. And what he saw made his blood run cold. The energy readings from those ships were wrong. No, not just wrong, impossible. The signatures didn't match any technology known in the archives. Power levels were unstable, too high for ships that size. Shield readings showed nothing. No defense systems. No weapon ports on the outside. But the energy was inside, packed so tightly it seemed like the ships were not carrying weapons, they were weapons. He stepped forward slowly, nervous but determined. Excuse me, council members, he said, his voice quiet compared to the booming voices of the chamber. There is something unusual about these ships. The energy cores are not stable. They look like they're made for short bursts of extreme power, and their hulls don't reflect light, they absorb it. This might not be a scout fleet. It might be something else. For a moment, the room grew quiet. A few commanders turned to look at the officer. Then someone laughed again, louder this time. Are you telling us that 12 ghost ships with magic engines are coming to destroy the greatest fleet in the galaxy? More laughter. One general even wiped a tear from his eye. Get this child out of here. We have real threats to deal with. But Relin didn't leave. He raised the volume of the incoming signal, and a sudden, chilling voice echoed through the chamber. It was calm, clear, and translated perfectly into every language in the room. This is the Terran Union. You have entered restricted space. Surrender your fleet and return to your territories. You are in violation of our peace zone. Silence followed. The council looked at each other. Terran? The word brought confusion. Some remembered rumors of a planet called Earth, far out on the edge of the spiral arm, primitive, violent, and cut off from the rest of the galaxy for centuries. No official records existed. Some believed humans were extinct. Others thought they were hiding, irrelevant, lost in their own wars. But now a voice claimed to speak for a Terran Union, and it came from ships that defied every scan. A few of the smarter commanders began to grow uneasy. They stopped laughing. One of them, Admiral Sareth of the Ilari Corps, leaned forward and asked, Do we have any record of human warfare? A silence fell again, this time heavier. No one had. Not in the past 100 years. Then someone else spoke, a quiet strategist from the Deep Space Uruk Mind Collective. We studied early human data centuries ago. Their planet was unstable, but their weapons were brutal. They fought wars with full destruction, not for control, for survival. And their technology always advanced during war. The idea hung in the air. If this was true, if these ships were built not for war, but for survival, then they might be more dangerous than any of the Council had ever faced. Still, most of the leaders refused to believe it. It doesn't matter what stories we've heard, one barked. 12 ships against 3,000? This will be over in minutes. They agreed to send a battle fleet to meet the intruders. Not all of it, just a third. Enough to make a statement. Enough to crush them. The orders were sent, the screens lit up with moving markers, and the Council returned to their seats. The mood was different now. Less laughter. More watching. Relin stepped back into the shadows, heart racing. He had seen something in the human ships that others hadn't. They were not just powerful. They were calm. They moved without fear, without hurry, like predators that already knew the outcome of the hunt. The countdown began for the approaching fleet to engage. Some generals smiled, ready to enjoy the quick destruction. Others, like Relin, could only watch and wonder what kind of species dared to face the galaxy's most powerful force. With so few ships and no fear at all, as the Galactic Union's battle fleet closed the distance toward the unknown intruders, the great war monitors on Veltran Prime lit up with streams of data, tracking every movement, every engine pulse, every second ticking closer to engagement. Commanders and generals sat silently now, their laughter gone, replaced by cold concentration. 12 human ships floated calmly in the center of the screen, not changing formation, not taking a defensive position, and not showing any signs of fear. Their hulls still absorbed light like a black hole, giving off no reflection, and their engines pulsed with low, unreadable signals. The 3,000-ship armada had broken into several wings, coming from different angles, surrounding the small fleet with perfect tactical precision. But something didn't feel right. They waited for the enemy to flinch, to move, to reveal panic, but the Terran fleet simply remained still too still. Then the voice returned. Cold, measured, clear. This is your final warning. You are approaching Terran defense space. Any aggressive action will be met with force. Retreat immediately. The words were not shouted. They were not threatening in tone. They were calm. So calm it made some commanders uneasy. Admiral Sareth of the Yulari Corps, whose instincts had kept him alive through 20 wars, leaned forward and whispered, "That is not the voice of fear. That is the voice of certainty." But the main fleet commander ignored it. The order was given. Strike first. Disable their engines. Capture the ships. Make an example of them. Do not destroy show dominance. A full wing of 80 destroyers advanced, weapons charged, shields at maximum. Then, within seconds, everything changed. The first destroyer vanished, no explosion, just disappeared from the sensors, as if space itself had folded around it. The second melted mid-flight, its armor turning white-hot, then red, then gone. The third ship broke in half with such precise cuts that its pieces floated for a moment before bursting apart. In less than 10 seconds, 22 ships were gone, and not a single Terran ship had moved from its position. The chamber back on Veltran Prime exploded in shouts, confusion, and disbelief. Data feeds scrambled. Battle AI systems failed to understand what was happening. The Terran ships still hadn't fired in any visible way. No projectiles, no missiles, no lasers. Just silence, followed by destruction. The remaining ships pulled back in panic, but another wave of invisible force hit them, and more vanished. The fleet scattered. Some tried to retreat, others charged in desperation, and all of them failed. Within 3 minutes, 1/3 of the Union's proud battle fleet was gone, reduced to twisted metal and fading signals. Silence filled the council chamber. Some commanders stood frozen, unable to believe what they saw. Others whispered to themselves, asking the same question, "Who are they?" The same calm voice returned, this time broadcasting on every screen, every channel, directly into every mind tuned into the system. "We warned you. We gave you a chance. The Terran Union does not seek war, but we do not fear it. The name echoed through the room. Terran Union. Finally, one of the historians, an old being from the knowledge world of Lither, stepped forward. He had lived for centuries, read more data than anyone alive, and his face was pale with realization. "They are human," he said softly. "From Earth. Long ago, before the Galactic Union, they were contacted. But something went wrong. A war broke out. Not with us, but between humans and an early alliance. We assumed they were destroyed. Their planet went silent. No communication. But we never checked. We forgot them." The room turned toward him. "Forgot them?" someone asked. "Yes," the historian replied. "We underestimated them. They were primitive, chaotic, but their minds, their will, unlike anything we'd seen. They do not fight for honor, for expansion, or even for victory. They fight to survive. And in doing so, they become unstoppable." The words sent a chill across the chamber. Other records began appearing. Ancient files, hidden away, classified reports from failed first contacts. Reports of human adaptability, emotional unpredictability, and a strange pattern they always got stronger after each loss. Their wars made them smarter. Their defeats made them faster. They studied their enemies, copied technologies, and then improved them in terrifying ways. And worst of all, they were patient. If these 12 ships were all that remained of their kind, then humanity had not only survived in secret, but grown into something new, something dangerous. The Council's leader, a four-eyed diplomat named Valor, turned pale. "How could we forget a species like this?" The historian shook his head. "Because they wanted us to forget. They vanished, not because they were weak, but because they were preparing." More data came in. The Terran ships were not just war machines, they were living systems. AI-controlled, possibly linked by thought, using technology no one had ever seen. Some ships had no crew, others had full life readings, but no known life forms. Their engines operated without fuel. Their hulls repaired themselves. They had found a way to bend light, absorb energy, and redirect it. Every weapon used against them only made them stronger. One strategist whispered in horror, "They don't just survive. They evolve." Suddenly, the screen showed a live feed. A single Terran ship had moved. Just one. It glided forward, smooth and silent, toward the remaining Union fleet that was now frozen in space. A message followed. "You made a mistake. You judged us by our numbers, not our intent. The Terran Union exists to protect its people. This fleet is only a signal. If you continue your path, you will meet the rest." The room was now completely silent. No one laughed. No one spoke. The mighty Galactic Union had just faced 12 ships and lost one-third of its forces without understanding how. And now, a greater threat was promised. Not an invasion, not a declaration of war, just a warning. A name that had once been ignored, now echoed with fear human. For the first time in centuries, the leaders of the galaxy realized they were not at the top. They had mocked the fleet, laughed at the name. But now they knew. The enemy was not weak. The enemy was not outnumbered. The enemy was human. And the galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy had not yet recovered from the shock of the failed engagement when the real message arrived, not in words, but in action, swift and final. After the loss of a third of the Union's fleet to just 12 human ships, emergency meetings were held in every system, and panic spread like fire in dry wind. Some argued for retreat, others for full retaliation, but no one agreed on what the humans actually were anymore. To some, they were ghosts from an ancient war. To others, they were survivors of forgotten destruction who had risen in secret. But all now knew one thing: the humans had returned. As high-ranking officials debated, the Terran fleet moved. Not with hesitation, not with announcements, but with sharp and silent intent. A single message had been sent across the stars. This was not the first strike. That one belongs to you. What comes now? Is the reply. And before anyone could act, Before the fleet could regroup or reorganize, it began. In the outermost defense ring of the Union, located in Sector TARS 47, a military supply moon vanished from sensors. It did not explode. It did not fall. It simply disappeared, its surface folding inward, collapsing in on itself, as if space had erased its existence. Within moments, nearby satellites shut down. Automated drones flew into each other, blinded. Communications failed. Every signal in and out turned to static. The second target was a command station deep in asteroid territory, hidden from most known star maps, thought to be impossible to find, yet it was found. A black object, like a shard of broken space, appeared above it and released a pulse of invisible energy that cut through the rock like it was paper. No survivors. No distress signals. Just silence. The galaxy watched in horror. These were not wild attacks. They were precise and strategic, hitting systems the Union had considered untouchable. Then, the most shocking moment came when the capital shipyard of Veltran Prime, guarded by entire planetary defense rings, saw something move above it. A human vessel uncloaked itself in plain sight, not hidden anymore, as if daring them to strike first again. Union defenses opened fire with full force, launching thousands of missiles, beams, and automated drones. The human ship remained still for 2 seconds, then responded with a single shot. Not a beam. Not a missile. Just a ripple of energy that spread like a wave across the sky. All weapons froze midair. Drones dropped. Shields failed. And the shipyard's energy core began to overheat without cause. Within seconds, the entire orbital ring became useless, and the human ship vanished again, leaving behind only one message. We gave you a warning. You chose arrogance. We do not repeat ourselves. Across the galaxy, fear began to settle deep in the hearts of species who had never known fear. The Union's greatest minds, tacticians, and analysts failed to explain how these attacks were possible. Some ships didn't use known fuel. Others bent gravity. Some attacks made no sound, left no heat, no trace. Every Terran strike revealed a different kind of technology, as if each ship was built differently, evolved separately, designed not just for war, but for specific enemies. It was then clear that the humans had not just hidden, they had watched. They had studied every race, every strategy, every weapon, and created tools meant to destroy them without warning. But what truly terrified the Council was not the destruction, it was the discipline. Humans were not attacking civilians. They were not wiping out cities. They targeted only military systems, only ships, only command centers. It was not chaos. It was not revenge. It was control. Cold, clear, and calculated. The Terran Union was showing the galaxy that they did not need numbers. They only needed purpose. And for the first time in the Union's history, every major faction sent the same request to the High Council: find out what they want. Meanwhile, hidden deep in a Terran command ship, far beyond known space, a group of human leaders watched the response unfold. Their faces were calm, but their eyes carried the weight of centuries. One of them, an old man with artificial implants and a voice like iron, spoke softly. They thought we were weak. They thought silence meant death. They never asked why we disappeared. They never wondered what silence really meant. The room agreed silently. For them, this was not just war. It was a message that humanity was not a forgotten footnote in galactic history, but a force that remembered everything, forgave nothing, and learned faster than anyone could imagine. The Terran Union had not wanted this war, but now that it had begun, they would end it with precision. And so, with each strike, they carved their name back into the stars. Human, a name, now whispered in fear across systems that once mocked it. The galaxy had struck first. Now, it was humanity's turn. The galaxy was in chaos, not because of what had already happened, but because of what no one could predict next. Every corner of the Union now lived in silence and fear, watching the stars as if expecting the sky to crack open and unleash another storm from Earth. The Terran fleet had disappeared after the last attack, not retreating, not hiding, but simply becoming invisible again, like shadows watching from above. No one knew their exact number, no one knew their true power, and no one dared to guess what their next move would be. The council had met in secrecy, unable to face their own citizens after so many losses. Spies were sent to find out what the humans wanted, but none returned. Some believed they were caught. Others believed they were allowed to return but were so shaken they could no longer speak. It was in this moment of tension, when the fear was at its highest, that something arrived. Not a ship, not a weapon, but a transmission, one single message, not coded, not hidden, just plain and open for all systems to read. It came in every language known to the Union, every dialect, every frequency, as if the humans knew exactly how to reach every being. The message said, "We did not start this war, but we will end it. We are not seeking peace. We are seeking truth. If the Union still believes in survival, send your leaders to the coordinates attached. You have 72 hours. After that, there will be no more talks." The message ended, and with it, the stars grew colder. The attached coordinates pointed to an old, uninhabited system long abandoned after a collapsed sun had made it unstable. No one had been there for centuries. Why there? What did the humans want to say? The council was split. Some thought it was a trap. Others believed it was the only hope of survival. But they all agreed on one thing: they had no choice. Within hours, a diplomatic fleet, unarmed and marked with signs of surrender, was sent toward the meeting point. Every faction sent someone. The proud warlords of Dravak, the mysterious thinkers of Aranex, even the cold tacticians of Voltran species that once called humans inferior now sat together in quiet fear. As the fleet arrived near the dead system, they saw nothing at first. Just broken rocks and empty space. Then, as if summoned by their arrival, a single ship emerged from the darkness. It was unlike any ship they had seen before. It was not large. It did not shine. It moved like a shadow wrapped in silence, and yet, somehow, it radiated power so intense that even the most hardened soldiers found it hard to breathe. A voice came through their systems. Calm, clear. "Human, we will speak now." No face appeared. No visual feed. Just the voice. It began with history. The voice told them of the Terran Union, of its rise and fall, of its betrayal by the Union forces centuries ago, when humans had offered friendship and were instead attacked, their colonies wiped out, their people scattered. It told of how humanity had disappeared, not because they were defeated, but because they had chosen to go silent, to vanish into the unknown parts of space and grow in silence. The voice explained how the humans had not returned for revenge, but for justice. They had studied the galaxy from afar, learned every trick, every weakness, and built a fleet not of numbers, but of nightmares designed not to conquer, but to break the chains of fear that had once crushed them. Then, the voice changed. It grew colder. It revealed something no one expected. The first strike that started this war, the one blamed on humans, had never come from Earth. It was planted by a secret Union faction that had feared humanity's return. They had created a fake attack, disguised it as human aggression, and used it to push the galaxy into war before the Terran fleet could be properly understood. That was the real betrayal. That was the reason humans had responded with force. The room fell into shock. The voice said nothing for a long time, letting the silence crush their thoughts. Then it returned, softer now, but still firm. "We will not destroy you. Not today. But understand this: humanity has changed. We no longer wait for approval. We no longer need permission. You will remember our name, not because of war, but because of the peace we enforce. From this moment, the Union will choose, face judgment, or choose unity under truth. There is no third option." The message ended, and the ship vanished again. The leaders returned to their systems, their minds spinning. Everything had changed. What they believed, what they feared, what they thought about humans, it was all broken. The message did not just deliver words. It delivered a mirror, showing the Union what it had become: arrogant, divided, and blind to the truth. For the first time in generations, the factions began to speak not in threats, but in questions. What if they were wrong? What if humans were not monsters but survivors? What if this war was never about power but about memory? Across the stars, citizens watched the message replayed again and again. They saw not an enemy but a warning. And in every home, in every outpost, the name human was now spoken with caution, not mockery. Something deep had shifted in the heart of the galaxy, and all of it came from one simple message, the one that changed everything. The galaxy was no longer the same after the message from the humans spread like fire through every system, every planet, and every mind. What had started as a war based on lies had now turned into a moment of reckoning for every species that once believed they ruled the stars. Fear had always been a weapon, but never had it been so silent, so cold, and so powerful. Now, that fear came with the name human. Yet it wasn't just fear that moved through the galaxy. It was something else, something heavier. Respect. The kind of respect that doesn't come from admiration, but from knowing someone could destroy you and still chooses not to. The kind that stays in your bones, even when no one speaks of it aloud. In every war council, leaders sat in silence, watching the replay of that last message again and again. They had mocked the tiny fleet once, laughed at the idea of Earth's return, but now even their strongest fleets looked weak when compared to the human ships that moved like ghosts and struck like lightning. The technology alone was beyond anything the Union had imagined: ships that could cloak in real time, weapons that used soundless energy, and AI systems so advanced that they predicted battles before they began. But it wasn't the weapons that shook the galaxy, it was the discipline. Humans had not wiped out the Union. They could have. And that was what made it worse. That decision to show restraint became the most terrifying thing of all. It meant they were not just powerful, they were prepared, patient, and above all, dangerous with purpose. Across the stars, things began to change. Trade routes, once controlled by dominant species, now opened cautiously to human ships. Treaties once signed with arrogance were now rewritten with care. The Union, once a proud collection of the strongest powers, began to bend not because of defeat, but because they understood that survival meant cooperation. On remote planets, children who had grown up hearing stories of human weakness were now asking different questions. Who were the Terrans? Why did they leave? Why did they return? And most importantly, why did they let us live? Academies that once banned human history now demanded their students study Earth's past, their fall, and the long silence they chose after betrayal. Historians who used to ignore human science now struggled to understand how Earth could evolve in isolation to a level beyond imagination. There were whispers too, secret ones from spies and explorers who had traveled too close to the human sectors of machines that thought like gods, of planets that looked untouched but hummed with invisible energy, of cities that floated in darkness but burned with light from within. These were not stories of war, they were stories of awe. Even the criminal networks that once operated freely across Union borders now feared human zones, not because of patrols, but because of what had happened to those who entered and never returned. A strange silence had surrounded the human-controlled areas, one that didn't need warning signs. It was understood. You don't go there unless you're invited. And even then, you don't speak unless spoken to. Slowly, the balance of the galaxy shifted. It wasn't about who had more ships anymore. It was about who had earned the right to speak. In that new world, humans didn't demand tribute, didn't occupy planets, didn't force ideologies. They simply stood still, and the rest of the galaxy adjusted around them. That was the true power they held, not in numbers, but in presence. Not in destruction, but in control. A few brave leaders requested talks, private ones, asking Earth for guidance, for peace, for a future together. Some were accepted. Most were ignored. Because humans weren't trying to lead, they were watching, waiting, measuring who had learned from the past. One mistake could bring silence again, and everyone knew that silence would be followed by something no one could survive. Respect turned into policy. Fear turned into caution. And the new galaxy, the one born from that first strike, from that single message, now moved under the invisible gravity of Earth's decision. It was no longer about fighting humans. It was about never giving them a reason to fight again. The stars still looked the same, but their meaning had changed. Somewhere in the vast darkness, human ships continued to drift, silent, waiting, always present. And every species, no matter how far, no matter how proud, now carried that knowledge with them like a second skin. Humanity had returned. They had endured the lies, survived the betrayal, and risen from silence with power wrapped in patience. In the end, the galaxy was not conquered, not burned, not ruled. It was simply warned. And that warning,